Never enough to be enough for me. In my reflection, I am incomplete. I only see what I will never be. But I don't have to be perfect, 'cause you already are. So take heart, my weary soul. I will keep holding on till God give me eyes to see all that you've always seen. Take heart, my weary soul. I will keep holding on till God give me eyes to see all that you've always seen in me. Discovering who I am and who you are. Before I could speak, you spoke into the dark. Before I could breathe, you purified my heart. And I don't have to be perfect, 'cause you already are. Yeah. Take heart, my weary soul. I will keep holding on to you. God, give me eyes to see all that you've always seen. Take heart, my weary soul. I will keep holding on to you. God, give me eyes to see all that you've always seen. You gave your life for me. It cost you everything. God, give me eyes to see all that you've always seen. You gave your life for me. It cost you everything. God, give me eyes to see all that you've always seen in me. You call me worthy. Your love defines me. Now I know who I am. No, I won't chase it. I'll just receive it. I'll rest in who you are. You call me worthy. Your love defines me. Now I know who I am. No, I won't chase it. I'll just receive it. I'll rest in who you are. I'll rest in who you are. Forgetting my past and walking in the light. I'm rid of the fears that once controlled my life. Nothing can steal what's already mine. Oh, you call me perfect, 'cause that's just who you are.
Hey, good morning. Glad that you guys are back with us. And before we go too far into this, I'm going to talk about checking the mail here in a second, which is one of my jobs. So whoever you're around right now, whether, and you may be there with a roommate or by yourself, you may be with your family, or you may live by yourself and you have to do all the chores yourself. But I'd love for y'all to kind of look around and begin to have maybe some eye contact of how many of you enjoy the jobs that you have in your house? How many of you enjoy your chores, the things that are assigned to you? One of mine is checking the mail. Like every single day, that's one of my jobs, okay? Some of our kids, they're responsible for taking the trash out. Some of them take care of the dog, all that kind of stuff. But some of our kids complain about their jobs. I complain about my chores that we have. And I'm sure that y'all have conversations like that as well, to where you're like, no, I'm good with what I do, or I literally hate the chores that I have. Well, one of mine is checking the mail. Now, one of my kids, the other three don't even know that mail exists for the most part. I got one kid that whenever we come back and he sees me toward the mail, he loves to go and beat me to the mailbox because he just thinks it's incredible that something is coming in the mail. But most of the time when I go to the mail, it's just because of email and all that kind of stuff. There's so many different ways that we get communication and that we get information. But one of the great things about going to your mailbox and pulling something out that is exciting or wanting to give you information is that you have it right there in front of you, telling you, hey, this is coming, or this is for you, or this is exciting, or you can't miss this, or listen, I cannot believe that I get to tell you about this opportunity. And today, I want to talk to you about something that I hope is going to be communicated to you, and that I think that God is wanting to communicate to us as individuals, as the greater church, the whole idea of who the church is globally, and then who we desire to be as the collective and what we hope to see God do. And it's out of Isaiah 6. And it's a passage that I guarantee that you've probably heard before. Some of you may be like, no, I've never heard of Isaiah 6, which makes a lot of sense. Not everybody was raised in church. Not everybody has had that same experience. But if you've been to church at all, you probably have some kind of idea of at least a guy named Isaiah, or someone in the Bible named Isaiah, or hey, there's a place in the Bible called Isaiah. So I want to read some of this to you and kind of talk through it and explain it and see how it has context in who we are. So this is Isaiah. This is chapter 6. Now, this is in the older portion of the Bible. This is in what we call the Old Testament. And it begins in chapter 1, and we're going to look all the way through verse 13. And so it says this: in the year that King Uzziah died, this is Isaiah. So he's talking about this vision that he has, this vision that he is having this opportunity to have to be able to explain something that is pretty incredible. So he says, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Now, I think what's interesting is that he used King Uzziah, he used this event in his life, the death of King Uzziah, to kind of use it as this time marker. Now King Uzziah was a good and wise king, and he died tragically because of a transgression, but Isaiah kind of used this marker to say that in that same year of this guy that most of the people he was talking about would know who that was, Isaiah, saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Now, it's this very big, grand, dramatic vision that is showing this holiness, the bigness of who the Lord is, saying that he was high and lifted up. That's very specific language of saying who he is as this idea of sitting on a throne, and that the train or the hem of his garment was so big it actually filled up the temple. And then it goes on to say, above him, so above the Lord, above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. Now, you're going seraphim, so they're kind of like this, these created beings, kind of like these angelic type beings that the Bible talks about specifically in the Bible, but specifically in this passage. So it says, above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. So again, this is a vision. So he is seeing these created beings. They had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face. With 2 he covered his feet. And with 2 he flew. Now what's interesting about this is the way that he talks about these beings, these creatures having these 6 wings. Because when you look at it, some of the things that I read kind of getting ready and looking at this is that when they covered his face, that's a sign of humility. And when he covered his feet, that can be a sign of humility. But with the 2, it shows that there is this action that is going to happen. So it's like this created being of God is giving these examples of these places of humility, but also that 2 of the wings that were there that they flew. So there's this action that is happening out of these kind of places and contexts of humility. And then it says in verse 3, it says, and one called to another and said, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. Now, you guys have probably heard, people talk about, holy, holy, holy is the Lord. There used to be a song that was kind of popular that were sung in churches. There's a lot of worship songs now that talk about holiness and things of that nature. But I think what is interesting is the first, forever that I read this passage, I was thinking that they were singing this to the Lord. But it says that, and one called to another and said, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. They are addressing each other. Now, they know that they're there for the Lord. They know that the temple is being filled by this deal. They know that, hey, listen, they've got 4 wings that are covering the feet and the face that shows humility. They know that they've got 2 wings that are ready to fly, showing action. And then they are looking and they are addressing each other. They're not just only looking at God, singing to him. They are addressing each other, and they are all of a sudden having this community moment. They are having this shared experience when they go, listen, all of this that we're seeing right now, holy, holy, holy is that God. Who that is, high and lifted up. Listen, do we all agree? We all got this? Everybody? That he is holy. And the whole earth is full of his glory. And so they're beginning to give context to each other that we all know what's going on here, right? That they are addressing each other, they are speaking to one another. And then they're also addressing the fact that he is the Lord and the entire earth is full of his glory. Now, I think it's so interesting that if you're able to pull back into your vision and if you're looking at this as Isaiah, the first thing I'm thinking is, why are they talking to each other? Why aren't they saying this to God? Why are they not addressing God? And I don't know that fully, but what I do think is interesting in this situation is that the shared experience, the community mindedness of these created beings who are marked by humility and by action, that are looking at each other and sharing this experience of going, everything we see in front of us that is marked by God is holy and high and lifted up, and the whole earth is full of his glory. Now, we get into verse 4, and it says, and the foundations of the thresholds shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. And I said, woe is me, for I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Now, when it says in the foundations of the threshold shook at the voice of him who called, I gotta be honest with you, people get on to me all the time for being loud. They get on to me for having this loud voice, and Chuck, you don't know how to whisper, and all this kind of stuff. Well, I think I do know how to whisper. I am a great whisperer. I just choose not to a lot. But if you have kind of a lower voice, or you talk loud, I mean, I've walked into rooms before and I was like, whoa, hey, you need to settle down. Now, But I've never walked into a room and the foundations began to shake because of what I was saying. So as you're watching this, as Isaiah is watching this, I wonder what, even in this vision type state, he's wondering. And then the house is filling with smoke. This kind of begins to sound like a PSA for stop, drop, and roll, and for like scary things that like natural disasters and things of that nature. And then he gets to verse 5. And he says, "And I said, woe is me, for I am lost." Now that word lost literally means undone. Like I am losing it, undone. I am coming apart of who I am. For I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Here's what is happening. He is beginning to understand. He is beginning to convict. He's beginning to be convicted. He's beginning to understand that who he is around, and who God is. Like there's this comparative thing of understanding, I know me. Okay, I know me. For I am undone in the presence of something so holy. I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips. Now I think that's very interesting that they use the term unclean lips. So they've just seen the seraphim who are addressing each other, holy, holy, holy. So they're having this incredible shared experience moment that they are speaking these things and they are saying this. And then he says, I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King and the Lord of hosts. Now, look, why lips? I don't really know that I know 100% why lips. But when you look at that, what you're beginning to see is that Isaiah knows who he is. He knows who his people are. He knows what they're identified by. And he knows who God is. He knows that in this moment that, man, his righteousness and everything that is about him versus God's perfection is like, even as Isaiah trying to live this incredible life or doing the best that he can, like so many of us, that we fail, we don't have incredible moments sometimes, but we're doing the best we can to live a life in obedience to God. Even that, in direct comparison to God's perfection, Isaiah is like, man, woe is me. I am undone. Almost like I don't even know what to do right now. Like just the obvious comparison of something so perfect and holy versus me, knowing everything I know about myself, and then knowing that he says that I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. It's like, I not only am a man of this, but I dwell among people who have the issue that I do. He goes on to say, then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal, that he had taken with tongs from the altar. I also think it's crazy that in this vision, these seraphim, these created angelic type beings, and that's the only way I really know how to explain it. There are much more formal ways of addressing who the seraphim were, but just think about that from the way of like these are created beings of God, that even that being that had to use tongs to be able to get this coal from the altar. Like imagine the heat that Isaiah is seeing in this vision, that level of protection had to happen. And he touched my mouth and said, behold, this has touched your lips, your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for. Man, this coal was so hot that the angel had to use tongs. You know, it's talking about in verses 6 and 7, this cleansing of guilt, this cleansing from guilt, knowing that he is seeing this seraphim fly to him, knowing that he has taken this coal from the altar, and then he touched my mouth. Now, okay, so I don't like people to feed me food, and so I can't even imagine like if I'm Isaiah getting this thing, seeing this flying creature with 6 wings, and knowing that all this incredible stuff is happening, go and have to get tongs, go to the altar, get a burning coal, and now it's flying at me. I probably, in my own like just craziness, probably having a weird moment, because again, I don't want to touch other people's food. I'm really picky about that. I don't want to eat off your fork. I don't want anybody to feed me or anything like that. And so I can just kind of have this moment of be like, well, like protection, like no, you need to get away from me, almost swatting this away. That kind of tends to be my nature. Here's what Isaiah does. He allows the seraphim to touch his mouth and then say, behold, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away and your sin atoned for. Man, he has already said, I'm a person of unclean lips. He has already said that I am in the midst of a people of unclean lips. And then that is the area where the seraphim, I believe, have been instructed to go and then to take the coal, that hot coal from the altar, and then to touch that mouth, to touch that area that has the lips, and then say, behold, this has touched your lips, your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for. There is a sense of healing that is happening here. Isaiah knows who he is. He knows who he's surrounded by. He's seeing that who God is, and then he is addressed. He has confessed who he is. And then he sees in this vision this act of healing that comes from where he has confessed. He sees this seraphim bring those coals to his lips, to his mouth, and say, your guilt is taken away and your sin atoned for. Instead of having to be identified in this moment of just, man, I'm a person of unclean lips, and live in that, he has allowed himself to stay present and to experience this opportunity of experiencing healing. That burning coal experience was needed for him to experience that healing. It's meant to be freeing. You know, this situation was not meant to be something that ties Isaiah down. It's meant to be freeing. So, it goes on. Now, this next section, when it starts in verse 8, starts out the little part in my Bible, says Isaiah's commission from the Lord. So it's like Isaiah has gone through this almost training process of knowing who he is, knowing who the people are around him, knowing who God is, understanding that he needs healing, and then experiencing that. And then he says, and I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send and who will go for us? And then I said, here am I, send me. And he said, go and say to this people. So here's his commissioning. Isaiah, and I believe Isaiah, now it doesn't give a timetable of like when this question was asked by the Lord and when he said yes, but it gives this instance that it wasn't a whole long time. So how was Isaiah able to go from hearing this question to immediately going into, here am I, send me? I believe it's because of the process that he had just gone with. He knows who he is. He knows where his healing needs to happen. He knows who he's around. He knows who God is. He knows that his perfection in comparison to as righteous as Isaiah thought he was, that there was no way that he could, equal that. And he then hears the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send and who will go for us? And all of a sudden Isaiah's like, yep. Now I gotta be honest with you, that is not the way that I work a lot of times. Not that immediate, like I need to have time to process. I need time to think through things. And I wonder if he was able to do it to the point because he had already confessed where he was. He had confessed where he was in context with other people. And he was experiencing and he was in proximity to the real Jesus, to the real Lord, to the real God. He was in proximity to the real thing, to the authentic thing. He was able to compare who he was to the authentic idea of what it meant to be righteous and to be holy. And so he says, here am I, send me. So it wasn't just, hey, I'm here, but it's like, I'm going to answer your question of who will go, and I will go. And then he said, go and say to his people. And he said, go and say to this people. So he's giving him this commission of going, and then he is telling him what to say. He says this. He says, go and say to this people, keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. Make the heart of this people dull, and their eyes heavy, and blind their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their hearts and turn and be healed. The first part of that is an absolute beating to hear. Hey, listen, you just had a really cool experience and you just volunteered. And here's what I want you to say. Hey, keep on hearing but don't understand. Phenomenal. Keep on seeing but do not perceive. Make the heart of this people dull and their eyes heavy and blind their eyes. That is not what you want to hear going into ministry. That is not what you want to hear when you've been obedient to what God is calling you to do. Basically, you want to hear, listen, this is going to be such a blessing upon your life. Like, this is going to be something you're going to write in your journal and love. What he's hearing is, this is going to be a beating. Now, I wonder what went through, even though that this is talking about in a vision, you wonder what is going on in Isaiah's brain. So, here's the first thing that I want you guys to think through. If this was the message, if you had just had this really cool experience and this was the message that had been given to you, what would have been your reaction? What would have been your thought process? It's only one question to talk through for a few minutes. If you had just had this experience of understanding who you were, of understanding who the people were around you, of understanding who the Lord is, of confessing, knowing exactly, and then having this incredible healing moment, if the message you got was, keep on hearing but do not understand, keep on seeing but do not perceive, make the heart of this people dull, and their eyes, ears heavy, and blind their eyes. If that was the message you were to take, what would you be thinking? So I'm going to give you a few minutes to think through that and to talk through that, and then we'll be back.
Nobody owns it. Feeling alone, I could never control it. And nobody knows it. Nobody knows. I take one step, I fall to the pavement, trying on my own. You step in and take me to the sky, carry me back home. With you, there's no gravity. Take me back home. I'll be in with you. There's no gravity. Take me back. Take me back. I'm feeling so weightless. Nothing can change this. I found a home thinking now that I made it, nothing can take this. And now that you know I found my way, and if I fall again, I'll fall into your arms. You step in and take me to the sky. You carry me back home. With you, there's no gravity. Take me back home. I'll be in with you. There's no gravity. Take me back. Take me back. I'm light as a feather, better than ever. Living in favor, now and forever. With you, there's no gravity. I'm light as a feather, better than ever. Living in favor, now and forever. With you, there's no gravity. There's no gravity. Nobody owns it. Feeling alone, I could never control it. And nobody knows it. Nobody knows. I take one step, I fall to the pavement, trying on my own. You step in and take me to the sky, carry me back home. With you, there's no gravity. Take me back home. I'll be in with you. There's no gravity. Take me back. Take me back. I'm feeling so weightless. Nothing can change this. I found a home thinking now that I made it, nothing can take this. And now that you know I found my way, and if I fall again, I'll fall into your arms. You step in and take me to the sky. You carry me back home. With you, there's no gravity. Take me back home. I'll be in with you.
Okay, I'm not sure what your discussion would have been like, but I'm going to be honest with you. If that was me, I would have been very discouraged. I would have been maybe even mad of like, did you not just see what just happened? Like, I did all that, and I'm trying to get close to you, and now you're telling me this? And then it says, in verse 11, it says, then I said, so now Isaiah is like, hey, okay, how long, O Lord? That is so me. Like, okay, so if this is not going to be great, how long is it going to be? Because I'm really impatient. Like, I'm always the one that's like, if we're waiting for a table at a restaurant, if they say 15 minutes, I expect it to be in 15 minutes. Like, if it's 16 minutes, I start getting really, really antsy. Now, I'm not necessarily, I don't want to be rude, but I'm going to be a little bit, maybe questioning and asking and maybe a little bold to go up. Other people in my family who are, within 6 years of my age, that's not the way that they handle that situation, and at times may or may not get frustrated with the way that I handle it. But Isaiah asked a really legitimate question. He goes, how long? And then he said, until cities lie waste without inhabitant, and houses without people, and the land is a desolate waste. And the Lord removes people far away, and the forsaken places are many in the midst of the land. Okay, so I'd be like, okay, so it gets worse. So the first part was a beating, but I mean, this is literally getting bad. Like, did you not hear me? I said, I raised my hand, here am I, send me. You asked who will go, and I said yes. I mean, I felt like I should get some extra credit. Can I get the easy assignment for that? And you hear all this, and Isaiah's being really honest, very curious, which I think is super smart of him, and goes, how long do I have to handle this? And he begins to give this answer that's this truth, that's his answer, but not probably what Isaiah wanted to hear. And then it says this in verse 13. And though a tenth remain in it, it will be burned again, like a terebinth or an oak, whose stump remains when it is felled. The holy seed is its stump. Now, you're going, what? And so let me read that to you again. And though a tenth remain in it, it will be burned again, like a terebinth or an oak, whose stump remains when it is felled. The holy seed is its stump. This idea of what is happening here, that there is going to be an offspring that comes from it that does remain, that even though this stuff is not incredible, there is hope in what is going to remain. There is hope in what is going to come out of this remnant of that, even though that this stump remains when it is felled, that there is this idea of this offspring that is going to come forward. And that Isaiah, you being obedient to that is this incredible opportunity to be a part of that process. Now, you might be going, that sounds like the worst missionary assignment ever. Me too. Like, I would be like, man, can I get the one where I get to talk about the 7,000 people that got saved? Or can I get the one that they name an offering after me? Or could I also be the one where like I become like kind of semi-famous because of the work that I'm doing? Like, I would like that gig, not the gig that's like, I have recognized who I am recognizing who my people are, I am recognized who you, God, I have confessed that there is healing that needs to take place, I have allowed that healing to experience, I have been obedient and said yes, and even though this seems hard, I'm going to go and be a part of that. I hope what Isaiah heard in all of this is this. It is not going to be the easiest thing that you've ever done. It is not always going to be incredible, but there is hope in what is going to occur. And that, when I think about this passage and think about what it means and what it is, this commissioning that happened with him back in verse 8, I hope that is what led him. That understanding that he said yes to not just this proclamation, he didn't just say yes to this idea, he said yes to a question that God himself had asked him. And that he had placed himself in a position because of the healing, because of the curiosity, because of the confession that was happening in his life, because he recognized who he was in comparison to God, recognized who the people were around him, that he had seen this vision of knowing that not only do I believe that this is who God is, but I'm seeing all these angelic beings who are marked by humility and marked by action, that are also addressing each other and saying, this is the real deal. This is who is holy and high and lifted up. This is someone who in all the earth, that this is incredible. When we think about who we are, now we're not Isaiah. Most of you have probably not had a vision like this. But I don't think that the goal is to make yourself Isaiah in this story. I think the goal is to learn from this and what it is and what it has and what it has meant. And here's where I think we as individuals and then we as a church as a whole and then we as the collective, that we allow ourselves to be positioned to hear from the Lord. And that positioning ourselves to hear from the Lord, that James 4:8 I talk about a lot, of drawing near to God and knowing that he will draw near to you. The invitation to draw near to him and the promise, the belief and the promise that he's going to draw near to us. That we get to place and position ourselves in such a way that we allow ourselves to have these moments to where we know more who we are because of our experience with God. That we know more of who the people are around us because of our experience with God. That the confession and the curiosity that we have that allow us to say things like, I am a man of. That we get to walk toward healing that addresses those very things in our life. And that because of all that, we put ourselves in a position to be able to answer the question that God has in front of us and then go and experience that. And knowing that some of those moments have these really awkward, like this doesn't seem like this is so great, but also that the bigger picture of what we're commissioned to do, that there is hope in that and what he wants to do. My challenge to you today is the same challenge that I give to myself, which is this: as I look through this passage, the question is if I put myself in the same position as Isaiah being able to experience this thing, am I in an experience to be able to experience who I am compared to who God is, and what have I learned through that? What have I learned about the people because of my connection to God? What have I learned about God because of putting myself in a position to experience how incredible he is? And have I been willing to be confessional about where I need help? Have I allowed that help and healing to come for me? Am I trying to swat away that coal that is coming toward my mouth, or am I able to experience this healing that needs to occur in who I am, in my heart, soul, mind, and body? And then am I willing to answer what God has called? Now, that answer, I truly believe that what we can learn from that is that answer, it doesn't have to be this huge thing like you're going to move to a third world country and share the gospel there, which I think is an incredible calling. It can mean what are you learning that when these experiences happen, whatever they are, those small, medium, or large, or life-changing moments, or just everyday moments, that you are ready to answer the question obediently because of where you allowed your placement and your positioning to be to God, and knowing who he is and knowing who you are. And knowing that whatever you're experiencing, knowing that, like in verse 13, that there is hope, that the stump remains, that there is going to be this idea that things are coming, and that is where the hope is what God is wanting to do, even beyond maybe what you're able to understand. God is wanting to do some incredible things. And so I hope that this is encouraging to you, because I really believe that God wants us to say yes to some things as a church and as individuals that, it may not always be like these incredible moments that everybody desires, but that we have the faith and we have a position and place ourselves in such a way that we get to walk through those moments knowing that there is hope in what God wants to do, and that we're excited about where God has us going. So listen, at the end of today, there are going to be some questions up on the screen that I hope that you guys will talk through or think through as you have these moments after this time. I'm excited about what is happening coming up. I'm excited about what God is doing and what he has done. So listen, I want to thank you so much for hanging out with us today, and we look forward to seeing you very, very soon. That's it.
Teach me how to be still, even when my thoughts won't stop. Show me what it means to rest, even when I cannot see past myself. You hear